Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education on Monday, April 11th, 2022. If you'd please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yesterday, we tragically lost one of our own, Elena Williams. Elena was a senior at Washington High School. She was upbeat and always bringing us joy with her laughter. She and her smile knew everyone, and everyone knew her. Elena was a resilient student who challenged herself academically and was planning on attending college. Last July, she took her senior pictures with a sign that read, "On to the next chapter." Elena's chapter was written too short, but she is leaving behind a story that has touched many. Please join me in a moment of silence in remembrance of Elena Williams, Washington High School, class of 2022. Thank you. All right. This evening, we start with a presentation on alternative diploma coursework with Mr. Matthew Wink.
Good evening, Board President Skinner, board members, and Dr. Gibson Learn. Thank you for the opportunity to come to speak to you this evening regarding our alternative diploma for our Jefferson County learners. Next slide, please. Beginning with the class of 2021, West Virginia schools were required to offer full implementation of the alternative diploma for our population of learners and all population of learners throughout the United States. The alternative diploma is a record for the graduate stating that they have met the requirements under the alternative assessment and the alternative achievement standards as set forth by WVDE as well as local education agencies. The standards of graduation must be comparable to that of the standard diploma, including 4 credits of English, math, and social studies, 3 credits of science, 1 credit of PE, health, and art, followed by 4 credits under their PEP plan. All total, that would equal 22 minimum credits. With regards to graduation participation, students are encouraged to be included in their 9th grade cohort as they participate during their 12th grade year. Let me be clear in saying no student will be denied the option of a standard diploma. If a student can meet the criteria of a standard diploma, they can graduate with one. Only students with a significant cognitive disability should be taking the alternative assessment. Next slide, please. The alternative diploma is one avenue to allow the learner to participate in the high school curriculum until they are 21 years of age, as determined by their birth date. Following the student's graduation ceremony, they may return to the school or specialized program through the school district until they age out at 21, or they meet the requirements set forth by the school district for awarding of their diploma. Next slide, please. The standard diploma, the alternative diploma has 3 requirements that must be met, and the school district is responsible for implementing them. Number 1, instruction in the alternative academic standards must be crosswalked to general standards. It should be noted that this requirement does not directly correlate to a one-to-one relationship. Standards are established to ensure they mirror the same big idea regarding grade level content standards. There must be an alignment with the state requirements for the regular high school diploma and the diploma must be obtained during FATE period. Next slide, please. This slide gives an overview of the current Jefferson County school population working towards the alternative diploma. Keep in mind that only students who have met the IEP significant cognitive disability criteria may participate in this program of study. This criteria standards are an IEP team decision, with all members having equal representation for determination. It is not a decision that should be done with a broad stroke of the pen. Currently, there are 67 students on the alternative diploma track out of the 1,258 students that are served by an IEP. Next slide, please. Once an IEP team has made the decision to move the student to an alternate diploma track, standards of study are established and are fairly straightforward through the 9th grade. I will say that our schools who educate alternate diploma students, including T.A. Lowry, Drisswood Elementary, and Charlestown Middle, do a phenomenal job of ensuring these students continue to be exposed to activities and educational opportunities alongside their standard diploma friends. As a parent of a young man who is on the alternative diploma track, it truly makes me proud to work alongside these professionals. When the transition IEP occurs for the student from 8th grade to 9th grade or 9th grade to 10th grade, the priority must continue to be prescriptive to the student and not a one-size-fits-all approach. We cannot take the I out of IEP. Next slide, please. This slide looks at 2 4th grade English standards. I chose these standards because the snapshot is pretty similar, standard to standard. This is not the case for all standards, though. As I stated earlier, there is not always a one-to-one matchup. But I did want you to see both standards, general and alternate, and how they mirror the same big idea regarding grade level content standards. Next slide, please. In 2017, Ms. Christy Horning went to Marion County and first saw the unique curriculum, working with their students. She returned to Jefferson County believing that this curriculum needed to be implemented here. Later that same year, she took fellow members of the department back down to see it again and brought it back to Jefferson County and implemented it. The WVDE did not fully endorse the unique curriculum until 2018, but it continues to endorse it currently. The strengths behind the unique curriculum include the fact that it crosswalks to our WVCCR standards. It is prescriptive to the individual learner, and it can also be aligned easily to the IEP goals. Next slide, please. Unlike some curriculum options, the unique curriculum requires the teacher to participate in a foundational course and provide the district with their course certificate before they can even start to utilize it. There's also ongoing PD learning options embedded into the curriculum for viewing at the educator's leisure. Next slide, please. We encourage and try to support teachers in the process of allowing alternate diploma learners to take related arts classes and vocational classes alongside their typical peers as can be safely done. Just as we described from the core classes, the standards can be crosswalked for these learners. At Charlestown Middle School, you can walk into Mr. Barker's computer class and see students on both the traditional track as well as the alternate track working together collaboratively on the same project. As students move into high school, we want to continue to foster this same collaboration while expanding on the specific interest of the student. If we have a student who loves plants and loves to get into the dirt, then we want to allow them to take classes towards that CTE, horticulture plan of study. If we have a student who loves to sing, let's allow them to take course 1 through 4 alongside their peers. Next slide, please. Later tonight, I'll be coming back to ask you to approve new courses for Jefferson County students that continue to allow this flexibility of learning. The IEP team will be making a decision in the 9th grade year on which plan of study to engage heavy into. Does the learner need a heavier daily living skills course of study and not focus on workplace skills? Or is it vice versa? Or do they want to have a myriad of the two? Again, this is an IEP team decision that is going to benefit the student for the next 4, 5, or 6 years. Next slide, please. This is one example of a plan of study. And again, this is simply a sample. This is not anything that's locked in, but this gives you an example of a plan of study for a student entering high school on the alternate diploma track. You can see that this student had 5 years of high school before the age of 21 and aging out. They could see anywhere between 5 and 7 years, a maximum. But we also have a student here who likes chorus, needs heavier exposure to daily living skills. Thus, there are 2 periods a year offered for this. But the IEP team believes that the student could also benefit from work skills exposure as well. Next slide, please. Later in the meeting, again, I will come back to you to talk to you about the alternative diploma standards and ask for your approval so that we can continue to implement these robust ideas for all of our students, including our alternative diploma students. Thank you for your attention. At this time, I'll welcome any questions that you may have. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You're saying that students with severe cognitive deficits will be required to take math 1, 2, and 3, the traditional, the same classes
ma'am.
that the.
Yes, ma'am. So, well, remember, we take those standards and we crosswalk them. So we don't take the West Virginia CCR standards. Those standards are then crosswalked over into the alternative learning assessment standards that the State Department has built out and gives us. So a student may be working on solving expressions. So in that solving of expressions, the teacher may utilize something like, here's a bag and we have 5 red beads and 5 blue beads and we want to put them together. That's the process of meeting the standard for that student.
What class would they be in? Would this be self-contained, a self-contained?
Yes, ma'am.
class, right?
It is resource class
Okay.
for those students.
And this chart, the pie chart with the different colors, MODID, what does that stand for? Moderate?
Moderate, and
Um,
then,
So is it just the severe that would be in this track?
no, ma'am, all of these students.
So moderate, what is the IQ? Are these broken down by IQ or?
So that comes out when they do the standardized, when they take the cognitive test for students. There are different levels that talk about whether they're mild, moderate, or severe. Notice we also have students that could have autism that are lumped into this alternative track. We have students that have other health impairments, severe medical impairments that preclude them from learning with their typical peers as well.
Okay, so how are they initially tracked into this program? And it sounds like they're tracked as early as elementary school.
So students into the alternative track are not tracked into there before 3rd grade. The reason why they're not tracked in before 3rd grade is when we start to look at grades. That's also the first time we start to look at assessments by the West Virginia State Department of Ed. Those students don't have to be tracked, don't have to be placed into their, I mean, they can stay all the way out until 12th grade year or post-grad 12th grade year. There's nowhere along that. Again, it comes back to the IEP team to determine where we are, and then the State Department provides us a rubric that we go through and we follow to say, is this really where the student should be? The first guideline is you have to be +3 standard deviations below the average. So
To be considered to have a learning disability.
no, ma'am, to be considered to be on the alternative track.
Okay, so what is it based on the IQ or is it
That's only
based
one
on?
component.
Okay.
There's multiple components. There's about 6 different components that go into the rubric.
Okay,
for
so
that.
but a severe cognitive disability, isn't that based on IQ?
That's one component. That's not the only thing. We are not allowed to take one data point and determine that that student is going to be on the alternative track.
So if they're 3 grades below and a certain, I'm not sure what the rule is here, but normally it's, to be considered to have a learning disability, you have IQ, average IQ, and then standard deviations in achievement. Is that the way it works here or?
Yes, ma'am. It's just below where the median is as to determine whether you're talking.
Okay, I guess
specific
I'm
learning
trying to decide if you're trying to say that cognitive disability is mentally impaired. because it's only 67. So are these the children that are fully self-contained because they have mental handicaps?
No, I cannot put that, I cannot lump that into one category. I can't lump in and say if they have a mental impairment that they are definitely self-contained and they're going to be on the alternative track. I can't say that because we have students that could fall under the mild category that are still out in the general population on a standard diploma track, and they don't even look at the alternative diploma. So I can't lump that all into one thing.
I don't think you're here. It's okay. What is the alternative assessment?
The alternative assessment is a test that's given for all grades 3 through 8, and as well as grade 11 for the students that are on the alternative track. It is state regulated we administer when we administer the GSA in the spring.
Yeah, but what does it consist of?
It consists of standards, and I, because I'm not a proctor, I can't look at the questions, but I can tell you it consists of questions that come back that are on grade level that match up to the standards in which the students should have learned as they went throughout the year.
So if this is an alternative assessment and it's a child with a significant cognitive disability and they're a 10th grader, and you're saying they're giving them a test that's on grade level?
I'm saying they're giving them a test that is based off of their cognitive level, that's based off of the standards that they should have learned in that 10th grade year.
Okay.
Now remember, and there was also different tiers for each standard. There's a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3. So then we go back and we look at that to see where did those students score out based off of the exact same thing that we do for our GSA.
I just have one. I feel like the public should have seen this so that if they wanted to comment, ahead of time. So I don't know how it works, but
Okay.
I couldn't find it. And I made a mistake and asked somebody else thinking I didn't realize who I sent it to the request for it so
Okay.
that I could view it. But I just feel like the public ought to have these kind of things up front. So
I apologize, but all of these
I
things
know that
came
you're
from,
new and I don't know enough about it either, but I'm just,
sure. I apologize for that. And I can definitely get that to Ms. Harner to put on the agenda.
well, it's
President
just,
Skinner.
they won't be able to comment in the later. It's just when there's a lot of information, and special education is very sensitive to everybody. I mean, it is, to me, I have a degree in special ed, so I'm very concerned about it. And I would like to do a lot more research, and now I have to vote. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Wink, I don't want to get into the weeds of the standards themselves because I know we're going to revisit that at the
Yes,
end
ma'am.
of the agenda, which, and I believe those were attached to the agenda.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
anybody could look at those ahead of
Those were,
time.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Is this diploma different? I know currently from signing diplomas, we have diplomas. And then we have something else. I don't know if it's called certificate of completion or,
So West Virginia does not have a certificate of completion anymore. That was phased out. So last year's graduating class was the first year that we went the alternative diploma. So you probably did not sign those alternative diplomas when you did the big group because those students came back and they weren't awarded their alternative diploma because they had not completed everything they needed to do.
okay, so this is replacing that certificate of completion. It's not in addition to.
Yes, ma'am. Correct. Yes, ma'am. West Virginia only has 2 methods.
Okay, that was my question. And then the other thing I wanted to know was with some of these life skill things, are we going to be able to use the Lolly House at all, or is
Yes,
that?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I just, number one, say thank you, Mr. Wink. This is really nice to be able to at least have this laid out and be able to look at it. And I think that a lot of parents are going to be really happy to see that, we're taking those steps because it is so important. It's been something that has been lacking for a while. I know we've done some things, but it's just really nice to have everybody included in every way possible.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
especially with the skill sets that they're going to need. So I appreciate the extra work that you put in with
Thank you.
this. Also, just how, other than the daily living skills that we're adding on the end, how is this plan different than, say, what we have done in the past?
Do you want to get into that now, or do you want to get it later in the presentation when we talk about the courses?
Okay, we can
It's
do
up
that.
to you.
No, we
you're
can
in
wait till the
charge.
courses if you're coming back. That's
Okay.
fine. That's
Yeah.
fine. Okay, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have the Deputy Superintendent for Instructional Support update, Mr. Banks.
Good evening, board members. I've also included a copy, excuse me, a copy of this on your table. So tonight I'm going to speak to you about two different things, mostly just informational, and also going to tell you where we are in the process here in Jefferson County with implementing two of these items. I'm going to start off with a story about a student that will kind of hopefully illustrate what we're going to talk about tonight. So imagine, if you would, we have a first grader named Emma, and Emma's having some reading difficulties. She's falling behind her peers in reading. She knows her alphabet. However, she's not blending letter sounds to make words. When Emma sees the word bat, she says B-A-T instead of bat. She sounds out each letter, B-A-T. That's how she sees the word bat. So her teacher notices this. She also scored well below the benchmark on the last classroom assessment. So the teacher begins to ask, is the student progressing as expected? And as I just explained to you, the answer is no. The next question the teacher asks is, how does the student's progress compare with others in the class? She notes that there's a significant gap in progress between Emma and other students in the class. In fact, other students are blending their letter sounds together to make the word bat. The next question the teacher asks is, has Emma expressed any concerns? Even though this is a first grader, it's a very important question. Emma seems frustrated when she's reading, and when it's her turn to read, she often puts her head down or doesn't want to read. So now it's time for the teacher to take the next step, to gather some information and some data. So she begins to do a one-on-one assessment with phonemic awareness with Emma. She was able to complete some of the task, but did not answer some of the others. When asked to match letter sounds with letter names, she could only identify the sounds of the letters. Emma likely needs intervention, help with letter sounds and phoneme isolation. So the next thing that the teacher does is to develop a plan for Emma. She's not responding to strategies implemented at the universal level. The universal level is something I'm going to talk about a little bit later. It is also called Tier 1. It is the general population of students in a particular classroom. In addition to universal instruction, Emma will also be receiving 20 minutes of targeted instruction, and that's what we also call as Tier 2. She'll be receiving this 3 times a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with an interventionist who works at the school. She will receive explicit instruction on phonemic awareness. Emma's caregiver will also be notified to participate in a series of trainings to allow the parent to understand what Emma is going through and what she needs to improve upon. So after 3 weeks of this targeted Tier 2 instruction, Emma is given another one-on-one phonemic awareness assessment. The teacher finds that Emma is showing improvement. She is now sounding out CVC words, which are consonant, vowel, consonant, with the appropriate phonemes. She can add and delete and manipulate the phonemes of these words. She demonstrates she can also sort words with 100% accuracy. So now, after the teacher has evaluated the plan, it's time to evaluate and adjust the plan. She seems to be responding well to the targeted instruction. Emma should be able to continue to progress with universal Tier 1 instruction without being pulled out into any intervention group. So what you have just seen is WVTSS in action. A student who starts out in tier 1, who after assessments may move to tier 2, and after interventions for a period of 3 weeks, 3 days per week, may move back to tier 1. In this case is exactly what Emma did. In other situations, a student may stay in tier 2 or could progress to tier 3, which I'm going to talk about here in a few minutes. So that is WVTSS, and you've probably heard of this. It's been called a lot of different names over the years: RTI, MTSS, and now WVTSS. The biggest difference is that there's been an addition added to the model, and that is mental health support. So the model that we were used to before had academics and behavioral support, but recently mental health support has been added to it. So if you could skip to the next one, keep going. What I have included in your packet is the very presentation that they gave us from the Department of Education. I included the same one because this could very likely be one that you might see at a West Virginia School Board Association training. So you'll see that the standards for effective schools, a clear and focused mission. And then the next one is, you could go to the next slide, please. Frequent monitoring of student progress, which is the basis for WVTSS, whether it be a formative assessment when a teacher is asking particular questions within a classroom, or as long-term as a end of the year summative assessment. So if you could skip to the WVTSS overview. All right, and very next slide. So this is the diagram that is new this year. And we studied this for quite a while to figure out what exactly it did mean. But you can see in the middle, the whole child. And so that's one of the big points of emphasis, is that this is about the whole child. Notice that mental health and behavior has been, are now components of the WVTSS model. So on the outside of that, those words are to encourage that the child is safe, engaged, supported, challenged, and healthy. The next three on the outside that you see in red, blue, and green, those are the three components of the WVTSS model: academics, behavior, and mental health. And then on the very outside, those represent the pieces that support those components. They include family and community, culture and climate, leadership and teams, and assessment. So that's the new diagram for WVTSS, which encompasses and makes up the entire model. Okay, so the purpose of WVTSS is to enhance the success of all students across the full spectrum of not only academic, but behavioral and mental health. It is called a multi-tiered system of support. In case you have a hard time remembering the three levels, I always just like to call them tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. They're much easier to remember that way. So from the model that used to be on the left to the one on the right, you'll see that the pyramid has been changed. And the reason that that has been changed from what it looks like 3 separate blocks there to one is that it used to be separated, but now, because of the example I gave with Emma, students will frequently move in and out of tiers. So this represents a model that shows that that happens frequently. Students can move in and out of tiers all year long, 1, 2, 3, and back, depending on their progress. So the next one is what we were talking about just a little bit ago. So if I start down at the bottom, the universal support, that's instruction for all students. And 75 to 80% of our students should be successful in tier 1. Next up, you see the targeted supports, which is tier 2. This represents 10 to 20% of the students who have not demonstrated growth at tier 1 or the universal level. What this could look like would be small groups, such as what Emma was having, could be brief interventions in small group settings, could be happening in a regular classroom with the single teacher in the room, could be happening with an interventionist that is coming into the room. Tier 3 is up next in the red, and that's intensive supports. And that supports 5 to 10% of the students who have not shown growth at the targeted level. This represents what it looks like is increased individualized attention, longer and more frequent sessions of intervention, and frequent progress monitoring. Now you might wonder what happens if a student is not successful in tier 3. Typically at the school level, what happens there is that is a referral for a SAT meeting to bring the parents in and talk about potential referrals or also other more intensive interventions. It's important to note that all students, whether they currently have an IEP or not, are part of WVTSS. So if you could move to the next one. So those are the 3 domains. Again, the change from previous times is that mental health is now part of one of the 3 domains. The next 3 slides I just put there for your reference. These are the different aspects of each of the 3 components. You'll see academics is first, followed by behavior. These are just policies that reference each of these. And then finally, you will see mental health for your reference. So an important question here on the next slide, reflection, what does your school and district offer as processes or programs of support at each tier and with each domain? So that's where our work begins. We have a framework that's been offered to us by the Department of Education. It's our job to make a Jefferson County school specific model. And those include what we do at tier 2 or what our interventions and resources look like at each of the tiers. Our process has begun by reviewing the state's document to help personalize it. So our first step is to really dig in as a department and see what we currently have available for resources to help meet the needs of this model. Then take it to a work group and start filling in the gaps there. And hopefully bring this back to you and ask for your approval as a Jefferson County Schools model for WVTSS. So what we will be doing is each of those 3 components at each of the 3 tiers will be determining the framework and the resources that we need to achieve all those. So if we go to the next slide, please, and keep going, please. Keep going. There's a quick reference guide that basically sums up some of the things that I have told you about related to the 3 tiers. So that's a quick reference guide for you. Another thing that I think was really emphasized while we were in our training was that universal and targeted are not 2 separate things. Oftentimes WVTSS gets misinterpreted as you're here and you're in the classroom, and then when you move to this next level, you're not in the classroom. Whereas universal and targeted, as you see in the diagram there, are overlapped quite a bit. Teachers accomplish that through differentiation and also by having small groups in their classroom. The next diagram is a pretty good one too. It kind of summarizes the process. In the beginning, when I talked to you about Emma and what the process that teacher followed, this is it. So the teacher identified and defined the needs of Emma, and that can be done by teachers, and also highly encourage that each school has a data team that meets regularly to review student data and make decisions about those tiers and where those students move. Number 2 is you're taking the data and you're basically further disaggregating the data to dive deeper into what the needs were. So for Emma's example, that was she was having reading difficulties, but once she dug in, she was finding that there were phonemic awareness issues. Develop a plan, just like Emma's teacher did, implement and monitor the plan. And as a student, work through their plan. And as I said before, they may move back and forth between tiers. And as you adjust that plan, and as Emma's teacher referenced, she was making progress in tier 2, and they felt she could go back to universal instruction and be successful after her 3 weeks of intervention. So the rest of the information is for your reference. There's a district leadership team that we've been working through, responsibilities, suggested team members, and example process. All those things are already in place in Jefferson County. Again, many of these things that you're hearing are not new, but it is refined a little bit to encompass a few changes. The last thing I'd like to mention is a student support survey. If you could go to that, it's a couple slides down, Jason. So this is one of the first things we're going to do. We want to have our principals and teachers to assess what resources we currently have in place for each of those tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 across all 3 levels. Areas: academics, behavior, and mental health. You may wonder about behavior. PBIS is a program that is throughout the state of West Virginia, and it really provides a nice framework to implement the WVTSS model at the school level. And it really fits those tiers very nicely. So that's really all I have on WVTSS. Again, it seems to me like as one of your school board trainings, you may be getting a very similar training to what I just shared with you. And you may know everything there is to know about WVTS, but hopefully I was able to give you a little additional information. One other thing I want to mention, and I'll entertain any questions you have. Tomorrow morning is our first meeting with a committee dedicated to looking at a new teacher academy. Our focus tomorrow is to first look at the structure of what such a thing should look like. Does it happen during the day? Does it happen in the summer? Does it happen after hours? Is it virtual? Is it in person? All those types of questions. And then the fun part begins, especially we have some brand new teachers on the committee and also some long-term subs, is what do you need to be successful? As you know, we have new teachers that come out of college, but we also have new teachers that are coming in as subs who have never taught before in their life. So we have to really gear this and personalize our new teacher academy to all those different levels of teachers. Much like WVTSS for students, it has to be personalized for our teachers also. So I will keep you posted on that. We're really excited about that work that we're starting tomorrow morning. And I think that's all. I'll entertain any questions.
Mr. Banks. Go on.
Is this the inventory, the student support inventory? Did you say you're going to do this in all buildings all the way across the county,
Yes.
elementary, middle, and high? Okay. So then we'll have a good idea of what we have, who uses what, and we can track that data more efficiently.
We'd also like to get to a point where we have common resources across the county. You know, there's a fine line between the principals and their autonomy to make decisions about what those resources are and the county making decisions. When each school's kind of has their own resources, it costs more money, but it also fits the needs of those students. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation, is how we can still give autonomy to the school as to what resources they may need, but also kind of streamline some of those resources at the county level.
I know sometimes even the PTOs or PTAs or, you know, they'll pick up something as well and
Right.
support something that goes along with that. So they have something other school doesn't. I mean, if it's
Exactly.
working though, it's good to
Right.
keep track of it so we know and we can get it in other schools. But okay, thank you.
What is the process for identifying a student for special ed if a teacher or parent wants their child to be tested? Because I know the county used to require an intervention first, and you mentioned this, and I'm wondering if the state supports that.
Mr. Wink, maybe you could come up and join me. I know the typical answer that comes from the state, but each county is a little bit different. So maybe we could tag team on this one. So the question is about how specifically a special ed student would be identified. I will say through the model I just shared, they would progress through the tiers.
Right, that's my concern because I believe there's some federal violations with that. There's certain federal laws that trump state or local school district. That's why I ask if the state supports this intervention first when a teacher or a parent requests that their child be tested.
Absolutely, the state does support this model first.
And I believe that that is a violation of the federal.
Please, Dr. Gibson, join us and
Thank you.
make it a
Yes,
party.
kumbaya. It's a team effort. To Dr. Joy's point, in which she is entirely correct, if a child is progressing through these tiers of intervention, and at some point in an earlier tier, they have any reason to believe that there is a disability present, they can stop at that point, request testing, and they go through an eligibility process. There is no requirement that someone progress through every level of these tiers in order to be found eligible. Certainly, we want the least restrictive environment we can serve a child in, which is always general education. So if a child is showing improvement, then that's certainly great. But if at any point at any one of these levels in a process, the team that's supporting this child feels like there's a possibility the child has a disability, yes, they certainly go through testing. So
The schools all need to be aware of that, because it's not consistent. It hasn't been consistent.
Can I ask a question kind of concerning to that? I'm on the circle, on the chart, identify, define needs. And how do you, I think you said something about a benchmark or specific assignments. How do we know that little junior would need to be at tier 1, tier 2? Like what specific data, because I know we're data driven in education, what specific data like targets and says this is one we need to look at for tier 2 or tier 3? Because I know you said benchmark assignment. I know people have benchmark tests.
Right.
So what triggers that for Jefferson County?
So with the tiered model, all students, when they come in at the beginning of the year, have a beginning of the year assessment. And sometimes that can drive an intervention, but also much the example of Emma, the teacher had started universal instruction and through observation noticed something. So like Mr. Wink was telling, it's not just one thing, it's
Gotcha.
multiple things that lead up to a change in the tier.
Good. I think that's a good thing because I think teachers have a way of learning and knowing which student, because you've seen it before, that they have a
Correct.
process saying, maybe we need to look into Emma's, what's going on so that we can get her what she needs. Versus, it's got balance between data and that gut feeling as a teacher that you've seen this before. So I was just trying to see if there was a specific thing that triggers Mr. Brown to say Emma's having an issue we need to look into.
Yeah,
the next level
it's
is.
definitely multiple things. One of the things I noted was that when she was asked to read,
Mhm.
she put her head down and was embarrassed. So obviously her feelings and how she's feeling about her confidence in reading is a factor there too, along with many other things, benchmark, observations,
Gotcha.
how she compares to her peers.
Thank you, sir.
Am I right, Mr. Banks, that sometimes these things happen and children can be identified before they do the standardized testing? Because usually don't they wait like into the first month of school to kind of get kids situated and whatever. But sometimes there's even children that are brought forth by staff ahead of time,
Yes, ma'am.
even before that, as Mr.
Yes.
Brown was alluding to, just from that gut
Definitely.
reaction. And then what are we doing, or can you speak to the dyslexia issue? I think before we had not had a program to target that, but then last year or the year before, there was something actually brought on specifically for that we hadn't seen in other areas. Mr. Wink, you want to speak to that?
So in terms of we have brought Orton Gillingham curriculum on board. That came on, I want to say last year or early the year before. And we are in the process of trying to ensure that all of our elementary teachers or all of our elementary buildings have at least one Orton Gillingham trained teacher, which weaves into what Mr. Banks was saying on the WVTSS procedure here. And I don't want to steal the thunder of this principal, but there was an elementary school principal that called us and talked to Christy just the other day and said that they're finally to the point this year where they're seeing the Orton Gillingham approach really making a difference for those students in the WVTSS process. And that's one of the big things that we're trying to do. And to Dr. Joy's point is to ensure that when students are identified for special education, that we've done everything we can to ensure that they remain with their typical peers as much as we can. And we're really seeing a lot of success out of Orton Gillingham. Our teachers are really on board with it and like it. So, and we completed one cohort. We're actually special education is teaming with Mr. Banks to train another set of teachers coming up. this summer so that we can get as many teachers on board that it really has taken off.
Okay, thank you.
I guess, can I ask you, because it's related, because Ms. Ogden mentioned dyslexia, and I believe the state still doesn't recognize dyslexia as a disability. Is that right? Or has it recently changed?
That's a question I would have to go back and research for you to see if they have that in there. I do not believe that is not one of the main.
Even though we know it is, but for some reason,
ma'am.
so you have to label it and call it by a different name.
Does that fall into that other health impaired
It
diagnosis?
can fall under other health impaired, yes. ma'am.
So it's usually a language processing. It's diagnosed that way. I just feel like parents ought to be informed that we don't really have a test for it that I know of here in this county. Is there a test for dyslexia?
For dyslexia, we do use it. We do have a test that's an early screener test. We've actually started working with Dr. Pfeiffer on some things as well. So I personally, and that's a presentation later in the month, but I'm very excited about where we're going with that through the efforts of Christy Horning, as well as our building level principals, where we're going with dyslexia. Again, I don't want to steal the thunder from them at the end of the month, but I think you'll be very pleased with the progress that they're making towards dyslexia for our students here.
Thank you.
Mr. Banks, a child does not have to go through a certain number of sessions now before they can be through the SAT process, be tested for special ed.
That's what I asked.
Right. But I just wanted to be sure of that. And we were identifying children too late as what
Yes.
was happening when we had a number of sessions and that they had a number of hoops they had to jump through before.
And that
We
clearly was the
identified.
guidance before, that they did have to have a certain number.
It's never
Correct.
been the federal guidance.
Also, Teachers Academy, we want to be sure that we have teachers on that committee that have gone through our Teachers Academy previously.
Okay.
So they can bring to the table what Teachers Academy was like when they went through, because a lot of those things that were in our past Teachers Academy were classroom management things. And if you can't manage a classroom, you can't teach. And those were very valuable. So we want to be sure that we have some people from our past Teachers Academies on that.
And Mr. Banks, just for clarity for everybody, the new Teacher Academy, is that a support system for existing teachers, or are you solving the national teacher shortage by creating and growing additional teachers?
Well, the new Teacher Academy is to support our newest teachers through hopefully a year 1 and a year 2. So we're a little nervous about 3. That means we have 3 different things going on, and that's a lot to manage. So but we're going to start off this year with our new teachers and our long-term subs. And then hopefully the year 2 folks will, be better prepared in classroom management and other things that are vital. And then we'll start having 2 groups next year. So that's our plan.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have the approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting held March 28th, 2022, and the special meeting held April 4th, 2022?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any question or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving March 28th, 2022 and April 4th, 2022 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next up, we have citizens' comments. First up this evening is a Zoom with Judy York, followed by Karen Buck.
I'm not able to set up my video for some reason, but I'll just go ahead and speak if that's okay.
Whenever you're ready, Ms. York.
Okay, well, I have a question for you. A non-zero number of goats, each with 4 legs, and a non-zero number of chickens, each with 2 legs, are living on a farm. Between all the animals, there are 3/8 as many heads as there are legs. Assuming that all animals have all their limbs, what is the fewest possible number of chickens on the farm? This is a question my 6th grader answered correctly as part of his qualifying round for the West Virginia State Math Counts competition. We stumbled on this program this year, and when he showed up in Flatwoods, West Virginia a few weeks ago for the state competition, they were thrilled to see a student from Jefferson County. Math Counts is a national math school challenge, and it's included in many West Virginia schools as an extracurricular offering. The final round of competitions broadcast on ESPN each year, so this is a really big deal. It's run by community volunteers who partner with teachers in the school who recognize that there are societal benefits of encouraging kids to tackle complex math and logic questions. Specifically, this program identifies students with engineering talent, and we need engineers in West Virginia. They build our roads and bridges, they design solutions for safe drinking, and they create sustainable energy sources. They even help design our new school buildings and the geothermal loops that will heat and cool it, and the network and cybersecurity systems that allow us to communicate. When we received such a warm welcome and learned more about the program, I thought, why not us? Why not Jefferson County? And I made a commitment to the director to stand up a local chapter. Now, tonight, I'm sure you'll hear more about the cultural war that a small group of citizens seems to want to continue to press into our school system. It's a cultural war that's not supportive of meeting the needs of all of our students. We have over 9,000 students in our school system, students from a diverse set of backgrounds, interests, and talents. And as educators and parents and a community, it's our job. It's our job to cultivate these kids, not pull them and their educational future into the muck of community infighting and fear-mongering. When our students' skills, like skills in math, science, history, writing, art, music, agriculture, mechanics, business, construction, or design, when those skills are honed and honored, kids feel seen. And when kids feel seen, they thrive and are more apt to stay here in Jefferson County and give back to the community that supported them. We are all in this together. And my hope is that next year we will have a full team of Jefferson County Math Counts middle schoolers invited here to the board meeting to tell you how they did in the competition. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Karen Buck, followed by Candace Wilson.
I represent a small group of people in the community who are wondering why it took 8 years to finally take the special education programs seriously. Okay, and the small group of community members have seen the following: millions in federal funding with undisclosed strings attached, the Cultural Unity and Equity Department, critical race theory, Black Math Genius, the failed virtual classroom, masking kids unnecessarily. Splatter guards are still in Blue Ridge lunchroom. Riot gates are in some of the entry halls of the schools, banning parents from the schools, endorsement of dangerous COVID vaccinations, school vaccination competitions, vaccine clinics in the schools, counseling department failures, continually falling grades of students, teachers afraid to complain, teachers and bus drivers quitting, questionable school budget entries, Google Chromebooks with a spy cam, responding to FOIA requests with what the hell is this guy's problem? This board member is still a member of the national state boards who labeled parents as terrorists. Pay raises for certain administrators and hiding it from the taxpayers. Declining enrollment, but building 3 new schools. Releasing employee social security numbers and making taxpayers pay for identity theft protection. Half-day Fridays get you $10. Pedophiles in the same school, same principal, same superintendent. Bullying in the school goes unaddressed. Dangerous pedagogy of Amplify, ELA. Obsession with funneling kids into colleges and universities. Obsession with skin color and sex. And gender studies, preferred pronouns, and equity clubs grooming our kids. May 10th election will allow us to rescue our schools. Our kids have an incredibly bright future ahead of them if we can just get the old Neanderthal thinking out of the way. We got to make some changes.
Thank you. Next up is Candace Wilson, followed by Joanne Curran.
I am here as a very frustrated and concerned parent. I want you all to just think about getting a phone call that says, your child has been involved and has a traumatic injury, and we are calling an ambulance to have him transported to the hospital. I received that call on Wednesday, March 30th at 1:13 p.m. from Washington High School. I'm here because our staff shortage, I know it's national, but I don't see much going on as far as advertisement or incentives to get more people in these schools to keep our kids safe. My son was a willing participant in a physical altercation, which started outside during lunchtime. No adult saw it. It was broken up by other students. 21 children then walked into the bathroom and witnessed this fight. My son was knocked unconscious and was left laying on the bathroom floor for 15 to 20 seconds before an adult was made aware. This is a serious safety concern for not only my child, but everyone else's child. We have to do a better job of getting people in the schools. I've seen resignations, leave of absences constantly. Our teachers are overworked. They're having panic attacks. They're losing it. And we have got to do something to keep our children safe. That is what is most important. I am a WVSSAC certified coach, and I am reminded every year in my training that I am legally responsible for not only their physical safety, but their mental safety as well. My daughter is also a student here at Washington and was swarmed by 20 students because of the altercation. She can't walk down the hallway without someone pretending to pass out in front of her. There were meme cards made of my son and passed out. Yes, the school has handled all of that. They've taken care of the meme cards, but I'd like to know first what we can do to get more staff in, and then what we can do to teach these kids that standing around and watching someone be hurt like that is okay. They think it's okay and they just go on. We need to teach our kids to be better people and have some respect for everyone else that is around them. So you can feel free to call me. Or
Thank you. Next up is Joanne Curran.
I must admit, it was enjoyable to ask the board a question that they had to at least try to answer at last week's forum, and also to see some struggle to stay within the allotted buzzer time. To follow up, the answer to my question about what a teacher's role is to teach academics was correct, and the parent's job is to do everything else was also correct. Raise their children any way they want, teach them any values and faith they want, discipline them any way they believe is right, and nobody else needs to like the parent's decision. However, sadly, that's not the way it works in Jefferson County and many other schools. Perhaps I should have worded my question differently and asked for a definition of a school rather than a teacher. In reality, the schools, the board, the unions, the superintendent push much more than just academics. You push many of your own version of what you stated are parental jobs. Why do you do it, and why aren't you transparent about it? In fact, and in documentation, in policies, you do many parental jobs. Your greatest abuse is that you pride yourself on loving your children at school. Couple of errors here. They're your students, not your children. That's a huge difference. Loving and hugging them is way out of the school's lane. You generally will have any given child for half of 1 year. You see them between 1 and 5 hours per school day, and with a room full of others that you also love. And then you end your love relationship with them and move on to loving next year's students, and on and on. Calling the temporary group serial kind of relationship love is very detrimental to children. Perhaps they take that distorted kind of superficial love into adulthood and move from one short-term love relationship to another, leaving a broken heart, broken marriage, broken families in their wake. I contend this is one valid possibility that you would never consider. Stop telling them you love them. Leave the loving to the parents. Parents love them for a lifetime. And when you pit them against their parents, you are making them choose. That is social emotional child abuse. You said teachers just teach academics, but that is misinformation. You are proud of your social emotional counseling program, which is not academics and is the parents' domain. Stop abusing them about their genitals, which is not academics or your domain. Stop culturally oppressing girls again by awarding great female honors to men who apparently make better women than women these days. You're really screwing them up by adding the gender fad into their life. This fad falls apart logically on its face. For instance, if males competing and winning in female sports was really fair, you'd see an equal number of women competing in men's sports and winning. Again, far from academics, very much a parental issue, whether you agree with them or not. God doesn't make mistakes ever, even if we think we're smarter than him. And what's with the narrative that CRT is about not teaching accurate history? CRT isn't about history, it's about today. It's about creating victim ideology all over again. Kids don't see their friends by race until teachers promote racism to combat racism. Just another exercise in irony, hypocrisy, fads, and mob mentality that is child emotional social abuse. Please leave them alone and raise their grades.
Thank you. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Mrs. Loring, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
We do. We have a couple of minor changes on the superintendent's recommendations concerning personnel. Underneath section 1, line item 6, the individual's first name is Isla, I-L-S-A. That's a correction there. It's on the first attachment, the superintendent's recommendations, the longer. Isla Gregg. Number 6. Okay, and then on the superintendent's sign-offs, the shorter section, on number 6 again, the bus numbers will be the change. And that is bus number 1549 to bus number 1201.
Okay, is that it?
That is all, yes.
Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended with number 6 on the superintendent's recommendations and number 6 on the superintendent's sign-offs?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I have a question. Often there are expenses that are paid to Epic. And I tried to find out, I just want to know how many positions are we paying Epic for? Maybe how many boarding office employees get paid through Epic so that we can have some idea of what, I mean, when I asked the person in charge of finance, she gave me a list, but 150,000 for pre-K or whatever they were. But how many actual are these positions, or what are these different services? Is there a way to get a list of, so that we can keep track or get an idea of what we are paying Epic for?
3 minutes is up.
Yeah, apparently, yes, ma'am. We can certainly break out during our budget presentation when we present our budget to the board. We can break out the different types of services that are offered in those, because to your point, pre-K is one of those. We have a regional pre-K program, and the Epic is the body that both distributes that, hires that. They have the Head Start program, they have the pre-K program. we run a number of services where we only buy a certain number of hours for certain services that we need through those rather than hiring full positions. But we can do a separate, when we have our budget presentation, we'll pull a separate section for Epic so that we pull those out for you, if that would be helpful. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Epic, once again, that's like the regional group, just so everybody
Oh,
understands. what-
certainly. Epic
is.
is the Eastern Panhandle Instructional Cooperative, and it's composed of 8 neighboring counties where we pool our resources typically in order to be able to lower the cost of services and be able to spread them across
Yes, ma'am.
counties.
Know a little bit about it. so
Oh,
thank you
yes,
for the
sir. Sorry.
clarification.
I just want to make
Oh, no, no,
sure
you're good.
you
No,
understood,
I love all
because
the information.
we're throwing a lot of new stuff at
A
you.
lot of
I love it.
acronyms. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gibson. All right, any other questions on the consent agenda? All in favor of accepting the consent agenda with the amendments to number 6 on the first section and number 6 on the second section? Say aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right, unfinished business. Request action to approve a vendor for the South Jefferson Roof Bond Project.
To share that information with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, whenever you're ready.
Okay. My video is not coming on. I apologize for that. It says it is stopped by the host, Mr. Johnson, but I will start. Prior to you making a motion this evening about the South Jefferson Bond Project roof bid, I'd like to provide you some information, which I hope will form your motion and give you more information in order to make that motion. We did have 5 bidders attend the mandatory pre-bid meeting, and 4 bidders actually made a bid. AAR Roofing and Sheet Metal made a total bid of $964,250. Blackstone Roofing LLC submitted a bid of $490,000. Hauk Services Incorporated submitted a bid for $1,096,700. Reliance Roofing and Waterproofing submitted a bid for $812,900. When we originally funded this project and with the passage of the bond in 2020, this project was designated at $121,021.88. So I want to give you some choices this evening for the bids. The first, the thing that I will be recommending is Blackstone Roofing LLC with the bid of $490,000. They submitted a base bid. What's included in this base bid is the right portion of the South Jefferson Elementary School roof. This was in the bond. The alternate bid, we had all bidders bid on because with the passage of 2 years, roofs getting worse, we have active leaks in the office and cafeteria areas. We felt it best that we had one roofer that could address all of the issues at once with this roof. So during this fiscal year, thanks to the board's wisdom, due diligence, and fiscal responsibility, we have budgeted to set aside funds for the eventuality of rising costs. And as you know, they have gone up. And we do have the ability to completely fund this project should you choose the base bid and the alternate bid. These are funds that have been set aside expressly for the use of roofs and HVACs in our current budget. So your choices in motion this evening are to accept the base bid of $245,000 and designate these funds we've set aside and add $123,978.12 to this project. The second choice is to accept the base bid of $245,000 plus the alternate bid of $245,000. This would require $368,978.12 more in those funds that we have set aside. So with that, I will await your motion, and then I'll await discussion that might come after the motion.
All right, at this point, I'm just going to ask for a motion to approve a vendor for the South Jefferson Roof Bond Project so that we can have a discussion?
Certainly.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. All right. Ms. White, can I just ask for some clarification?
Absolutely.
You went through those numbers. You're recommending Blackstone Roofing, correct?
Yes, and I am recommending that you accept the base bid and the alternate bid.
Okay, and how much money was set aside in the bond project for this roof? Was there a set amount or?
There was a set amount of $121,021.88 for it.
$121,000, right?
That's correct.
And we're saying it's gonna cost $490,000?
If you accept
If
the
we
total
do.
bid.
Both.
That would completely fix the roof.
Yes.
Why wasn't more set aside? I'm just.
Well,
why
the
is this-
costs have risen, and I added to the project in order to fix the total roof, because I think it's more cost effective if we do it now and do it all at once with one roofer. So 2 years ago, when the bond was set, we've seen prices rise.
So the price
Even
almost
though-
doubled for the project that we had intended, correct?
It did.
And Ms. White, one more question. Does that take away all of the options for the 2022, 2023 school year for our budget for fixing roofing projects?
No, it does not. And you'll see we're going to come back to this on the South Jefferson roof as well. So we have set aside $1 million. And if we fund this, there's a couple ways we can do it. If we fund this, we would end up with $675,986.88 left. And that's if we add a little bit to the Shepherdstown middle roof. So we would carry that over. We also have the latitude to use bond funds. Last year on one of our roofs, we saved $161,965. So we can actually add that to this project. I've talked with Beth, the senior bond accountant, about it, and that would bring us down to $207,013.12 that we would have to use out of our $1 million versus the 368 and change.
Sounds good.
And that's actually how I would recommend doing it, as we've reconciled bond costs.
And where, once again, did that 169 come from that we saved?
The 161,965 came from the Wright Denny roof last year.
Okay, so the Wright Denny roof was under budget by 161,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember who did that roof? Was that one of these people?
That
did this?
it was Blackstone. It was the vendor we're recommending this evening. Yes.
Any discussion or thoughts, fellow board members?
I just want to get clarification. So it sounds like there is $1 million set aside plus the 121,000 set aside. Is
Yes,
that
the
correct?
121,000 is designated for this project,
Right. And then,
which does, go ahead.
so that's a total for both projects, 1,200,000 roughly. Yes. If you add those together, 711 and 490.
Right, but I haven't yet discussed, I think you're adding in the Shepherdstown middle roof, and I haven't yet discussed the funds we've set aside for Shepherdstown Middle School, because that
Okay.
will be in the next discussion.
Oh, okay.
Right, so we do have money we've set aside for the Shepherdstown middle roof, and that's 594,000, so that's a separate discussion, but yes.
Okay, so it sounds like there's enough money. for both.
Yes, yes.
So Mrs. White, your recommendation is to go with Blackstone Roofing for the base bid and the alternate bid to make sure that the school is watertight.
Right,
And then use the 121,000 and change that was set aside from the 2020 bond.
correct.
And then you're saying that we need to supplement it with the, what was it?
Savings
Three-
from last year.
161,900.
161. Okay. And then the remainder of that, take out of the set aside that we have of the $1 million for roofs and HVAC systems.
That is correct.
Okay. Is everybody tracking? Took a few breadcrumbs, but we finally got back there. All right. So Mr. Osborne, would you like to amend your motion to accept Blackstone Roofing as the approved vendor for the South Jefferson roof bond project for the total bid of 490,000?
Absolutely.
All right.
I'll second
Thank you, and thank you. So there's a motion on the table to approve the vendor for the South Jefferson roof bond project to be Blackstone Roofing for the total bid of 490,000 to fix all the roofs on South Jefferson Elementary School. All in favor, say aye.
it.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Now we have another roof. The RFP for the bid for the Shepherdstown Middle School roof bond project.
I think this one's going to be a little more straightforward. So we've set aside $594,000 for this project. It is $711,000. We had 4 pre-bidders at our mandatory pre-bid meeting and 2 bidders actually bid. We had AAR Roofing at $1,277,250. Blackstone Roofing at $711,000. We are recommending Blackstone Roofing for this project.
All right, is there a motion to approve the RFP bid for Shepherdstown Middle School roof bond project as Blackstone Roofing for a total of $711,000? Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. All right, any questions or discussion?
Will they be able to complete both of those roofs in the summertime?
Yes. They completed 2 last summer, Blue Ridge and Wright Denny.
Does that give us any leeway on fixing the leaking roof at Jefferson High that they've mentioned last week?
No, but if it's leaking, that's good to know. I will tuck that up here and let Mr. Caton know so he can begin making it watertight
I think
until it
it's
can be
more-
replaced. And that, if it needs to, it'll move up on our roof replacement schedule. South Jefferson was obviously first. So Brandon and I will take a hard look at that roof replacement schedule and we'll make sure we adjust it accordingly if necessary.
I
And
think that
I
may have
think-
been more of an HVAC
Yeah, I think it
system
was the
than a
HVAC.
roof
Oh,
system.
HVAC. Oh, yeah,
Yeah, the
That's my-
HVAC is leaking,
right. Yeah,
which is
The
causing the roof to leak, but. you know.
right, right.
Okay, so focusing back on Shepherdstown, and is this bid going to fix the entire roof or just a portion of the roof or?
This
You know?
fixes many portions of the roof. It fixes the center rear, the front rear. It fixes many flat sections on the east. It fixes the cafeteria and the gym, not the cafeteria, the gym and the 8th grade wing. So there are multiple sections to address on this roof.
Is it essentially going to make us watertight? Is that what we're getting?
Absolutely. And we'd be adding an additional $117,000 from our designated funds to contribute to this project if you accept it without reducing the scope.
That's right. So you're saying that even with this project, there will still be issues with the roof?
No, I'm not saying
Oh,
that.
okay. I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, thank you for
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to accept Blackstone Roofing for a total of $711,000 for the Shepherdstown Middle School roof bond project. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and I believe that's everything for you, Mrs. White. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Next, we have the request for proposal for special education contracted services. Mr. Wink, you just keep coming back, don't you?
Like a bad penny, keep turning up. Just say a bad dream, but I didn't want to go there. Good evening again. At this time, I come before you to ask for your approval to place out a request for proposal for contracted services for Jefferson County Schools Special Education Program. If approved, we will be seeking bids to provide contracted services, including but not limited to occupational therapists, speech therapists, deaf interpreters, and student assigned nurses. This time I'll yield the floor back to you, President Skinner, and await questions from the board members.
All right, first we need a motion on the floor. Is there a motion to request the proposal for special education contracted services as Mr. Wink listed?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, any discussion or question?
Yeah, I have a question. So is it because we can't hire these individuals ourselves, like the speech therapist or?
Yes, ma'am.
And these would be organization that employs the various, or would they be various organizations? that employ?
The RFP is written that it could be various organizations depending on what the companies come back and are able to offer to us. Due to the variety, we could be entertaining multiple different places.
Thank you.
Mr. Wink, can you repeat those? You said speech therapist?
It includes speech therapists, occupational therapists, deaf interpreters, student assigned nurses, and we also throw in physical therapists, certified occupational therapy assistants. There's a myriad of different ones that we can ask for from time to time.
And just as a parent, how are we filling these needs now?
Through this.
Through this.
Yes,
So
sir.
before we got this, was there something else that was in place? Or is this a re-up of what we already had?
Thank you for asking. This is a renewal.
Gotcha.
So to my records, 2018 was the last RFP placed out. So we're
Thank
up
you.
for, to do it again.
Yes, sir.
Let's see where we can get.
All right, thank you. There's a motion on the floor. All in favor of requesting the proposal for special education contracted services, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Next, we have action on approval of alternative diploma course standards. And this is what you alluded to earlier that was attached to the packet
Yes,
that
ma'am.
everybody could
Yes,
look at
ma'am.
the details. Okay.
So for the final time this evening for me, I believe, I'm coming to you to ask you for approval for course codes that fall under two different categories. The first set of courses are learning strategies 1 through 4, and the second set is daily living skills 2 through 4. So for our learning strategies 1 through 4, these were developed out of a need to facilitate the success of our standard diploma students with an IEP. These standards will coincide with the goals of the student's IEP to offer greater success in the classroom. In addition, it will allow greater exposure to career interests, job-related skills, and habits of daily living. These standards are an extension of the newly developed WVTSS from the state level. With regards to the daily living courses, WVDE currently only has in place Daily Living Skills Course 1. Because students are not permitted to repeat the same course for credit, and as shown earlier in the new alternative diploma program, we have the need to have 3 additional courses which scaffold on each other for daily living skills. The previous mentioned courses, learning skills 1 through 4, daily living skills 2 through 4, with your board approval of the content standards will then be forwarded to the State Department for final review and approval before we can place them into our program of studies. The remaining courses, daily living skills 1, career exploration, career awareness, workplace skills, and career prep are locally approved courses which only require you, the local Board of Education, approval. Following that, they may be placed into the Jefferson County Course Manual for implementation. This time I yield back to you, President Skinner, and await questions from the board.
All right, let's get a motion on the floor. Is there a motion to approve the alternative diploma course standards?
So moved. There's a motion. You want to keep talking?
Oh, did we take a motion? I didn't write it down. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I missed that one. All right, so any discussion or questions?
We need a second first.
A second.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, it's out there.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I didn't have time to look real closely, skimming through. I didn't see, is there an opportunity for internships? Because these are I guess these are 9 through 12, I guess. And so there's job skill and then career exploration, career prep. But I didn't see in those.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. So the first thing I just want to make sure I reiterate is these are not grade specific. So when students come in and they're on the alternative track or they're in the standard track, the learning skills strategies 1 through 4 a student in 12th grade can take learning skills strategy 1. Alternative track, a student can take them anywhere along the course that they need to. So as far as internship, yes, ma'am, that would actually come under the work exploration program, which was previously in our school district already, which allows students on the alternative track to go out and work at certain businesses for 1 or 2 hours a day, maybe be folding pizza boxes or, greeting people or stocking shelves, that type of thing. That's where the internship comes in for our alternative diploma students.
But is it listed in here as?
So work exploration has already been approved by the board. It's an existing program, so we don't have to bring that back for approval to the board.
So it's part of the requirements that,
It is not part of the requirements. It is a recommendation for good practice for our students.
I noticed overlap with some of these, like in these classes for the career prep, career exploration.
You will notice some because what we
same
want to do is
material.
scaffold them up through. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But then you said that they're not based on grade level. So you could be taking a class, you said it's scaffolded. You could take one that you've already taken, the more difficult one.
So if we're talking about job interviews, the first time that they take the course, depending on the student, they may simply be walking in and greeting a person for year 1. And that might be what they work on all of year 1. When we come back the second year for job interview, we may introduce ourselves and sit down and introduce their name and start answering a few questions. So it really has to be tailored specific to the student. And that's where it's guided out of the student's IEP as well, for what they believe is needed.
Okay, thank you.
So go ahead. I'll wait.
I was just gonna say, are all of these classes, do they take place here at Washington or Jefferson? Or, I mean, I see some of these would really overlap with what the Lolly House does as far as, like grocery shopping and learning how to do home maintenance and, just all of these life skills.
They will to an extent, but the Lolly House is limited on the students that attend there. Lolly House currently is only limited to 6 students postgraduate, post 12th grade year that actually attend there. So you saw the numbers that we're supporting on our alternative diploma. We have a larger group of students that we need to allow that same exposure to have those same skills built in.
So would they be physically at the high school for 5 years, or that last year would they go to?
They could be at the Lolly House. They could also, they're part of our restructuring plan is to really develop those last 2 years or 3 years out more for our alternative diploma students to really get work exploration to a deeper level as well. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
That was actually the question that I had is, I know currently with Workforce West Virginia and that connection, it doesn't typically start until senior year, which I really don't understand why.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that's not a choice that we make, but is there a way to add that into the plan that with the alternative diploma? I was wondering about making sure that step, just for parents as well, because I think that's the step that parents don't understand.
Yes,
I know
ma'am.
personally with my own child, I physically called them and said, I need you to come junior year. I'll drive up there if I have to, but senior year is not acceptable. And then, of course, they have so much turnover that they end up losing their person, and they didn't end up being reseated until April of my child's senior year. So had I waited, I would have had no help. And so I know that happens, right? It's just the nature of the business that
Yes,
they
ma'am.
work in. But if we can do everything on our part
Yes, ma'am.
to head that off, let them know, maybe have them come in as part of that assessment to do, more engagements in a different way and handing out that information so parents know, because they do provide so much of that work training as well in
Yes,
many
ma'am.
ways. That was the only other thing I saw on that part, is adding that. And then maybe if we can add in as well, or just an idea of taking some of those parents that we know, are very engaged, very involved, and creating a cohort of them to come in and just say, hey, I know that you probably started that. And like I said, I definitely appreciate the fact that you put so much effort into this. It's just been really nice to see. So that would be my only other
Yes, ma'am.
thoughts.
Definitely. Yes, ma'am.
How are students assessed with these skills? Because I'm just curious, because it sounds like there's no order to these classes. For the ones that aren't, they can take it at any time. And then, so how do you assess? Like, for example, list the steps involved in handling conflict at the workplace. Is there a portfolio where a checklist that, yes, they've mastered, or it's just everybody's in this class and we're going to cover this? And
That's a great question. So that's really going to be individualized by the student. Some students are going to have a higher level where they can create a portfolio, like you said, that they showed mastery. Other ones are going to be that formative assessment approach that we're seeing back and forth. Some of them, we don't want to say it has to be a portfolio. We don't want to say it has to be a written paper. We really want the teacher to have the flexibility to work with the student and engage them to show the mastery of which that we want them to have. So there's a lot of autonomy and flexibility for how the teacher wants to gauge that.
so there's no standard, there's no rubric or any way to verify. So you go into an IEP meeting, maybe meeting for transition services, and the special ed teachers ask, can they do this? Or is that?
So our special education teachers do keep the anecdotal records. They do keep data that shows, a certain number of trials, or if we're talking about how do you show that the job interview skills were met, those are things that they do. They do create work portfolios. It all depends on what degree that looks like, though, based off of the student. And once these standards are approved, then we will come back to our teachers. Our teachers have taken a look at this. They have looked at it. One of the things that they really wanted to go was they wanted to go heavier into the daily living skills. They wanted more of that for their students because they felt like that's where their need was right now. So again, at the IEP team meeting, they can decide how much of that career they want to put in or how much of that daily living skills they want to put in. And how do you assess that for that student? What does it look like?
Thank you.
So will these things be used for this coming school year? We have to send them to the state. I know they have to be approved, and I know the schedules are. Yeah.
The good news is the students that we're talking about for the alternative diploma standards are a much lower number. So it's not that we have to fix 1,200 schedules, which is a good thing. So if you approve these tonight, they will be sent over to Washington and Jefferson to be scheduled. Now the ones that have to go to the state level, we will have to wait on them to turn those back to us with approval or changes, and then we work through that process.
And about how many is that? How many can go back and how many have to go to the state?
All the learning strategies courses go down to the state.
Okay.
And then the daily living skills 2, 3, and 4. So the good thing about that is daily living skills 1 for us, we can put right in now. As soon as you approve these standards for daily living skills 1, we can push them right in. All of the careers, we can push right in because those are already created classes and the state says you do what you want. You create the standards to what your board and your local education feels like is good. But because we're creating new courses over here, those do have to be sent down.
I have one more.
Yes, ma'am.
question. This 67, I think is what you said the number.
Yes, ma'am. Currently, yes, ma'am.
Is that over the 3 schools, Opportunity Learning
That
Center?
is 3rd grade all the way through their 21 years of age.
Oh, okay. So
Yes,
it's not just high school.
No, ma'am. That is all of our
Okay.
alternative.
And these
diploma
are just the ones that you're adding for high school?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
I'm just trying to get an idea of how many students are in each class with these.
And I can get that data for you. I don't have the exact breakdown, but I can definitely provide you with those numbers.
Well, how many self-contained classes are at the high schools?
So self-contained classes on the alternative track,
Yeah,
we have 3 at Jefferson. We do not have any alternative track self-contained classes at Washington High.
okay. So would students be required to go to Jefferson if they need?
They would not. No, what we want to do is there are students, we want to branch those students out and keep them in their home feeder patterns better than what we've done in the past, because that's where they came up through. So we would be looking at integrating these classes at Washington High as well and figuring out how we educate them.
So you're just saying you just don't need to yet. You haven't had the need. That's why you don't have them.
At this time, correct? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I would be remiss if I said that wasn't going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor to approve the alternative diploma course standards. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Mr. Wink.
Thank you.
All right, superintendent's comments. Superintendent, do you have anything this evening? And there's no executive session, so 8:36, meeting adjourned.